Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week we're taking a look at the most luxurious guitar ever made. It is of course the Gibson Gold Top Les Paul. One of the bigger guitar headlines of the last week is of course Les Paul going up for auction. The first approved prototype of the Les Paul given to the man himself way back in 1952, a guitar that he used throughout his career and affectionately referred to as number one. Now, given his reputation as an incredible guitar player, it's arguably his reputation as a pioneer and inventor that is more impressive, with any number of technologies, practices or techniques that can be traced back directly to Les that are still standard practice in the music industry today. As such, it's no surprise to see that his own guitar very much bears the scars of a man determined to get the best out of it. Any extra number of holes, routes, switching configurations or vibrato systems, testament not only to Les' strive and determination for it to be the best it could physically be, but unlike the Fender Telecaster, the guitar that the Gold Top Les Paul was introduced to compete with, when it was introduced it was still very much a work in progress, and it was to be another 5-6 years until it would take on the configuration that we now recognise as the classic Gibson Les Paul. In a broader sense, the evolution of the Gold Top is very much the evolution of the Les Paul. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at that progression through the medium of some truly incredible guitars that I've been very fortunate to play in the last few years. Now, before we delve into the specifics, it's going to be worth a very quick overview of the Les Paul's history and how the guitar came into being. After all, given it is Les' name on the headstock, you'd be very much forgiven for thinking that it was him that designed the guitar. After all, he did approach Gibson way back in 1941 with the Log, a primitive prototype of a solid body guitar, long before Fender launched the Telecaster, it should be said, but it was a design that had him laughed out of town. The design of the Les Paul came down primarily to three people: Maurice Berlin, president of Chicago Musical Instruments, Gibson's parent company; Guy Hart, Gibson's general manager; and of course Ted McCarty, Gibson's president, with Les Paul's primary involvement being the design of the trapeze tailpiece. Les Paul, however, was deemed to be the perfect vehicle for Gibson's new solid body guitar. His partnership with Mary Ford, both on and off stage, being one of the most prolific and hugely successful of the era, with 28 hits between 1950 and 1957. The new Les Paul Custom and Les Paul Standard were to be introduced in 1952, coming in black and gold respectively. First up, we have this model from 1952, the year of its introduction. Now, this particular one actually belongs to Bernie Marsden, and as you can see, has been signed by Les Paul with a nail no less on the pickguard. Now, it is notoriously hard to date these early Les Pauls, as they were made without serial numbers. However, we can roughly pinpoint this as a later 1952 model, given the guitar's fingerboard binding and the positioning of the height adjustment screws on the P90. The first 100 or so Les Pauls that were made are notable not only for their lack of fingerboard binding, but the horizontal height adjustment screws on the P90s, as well as the body of the guitar being about 1/8 of an inch deeper than your typical Les Paul model. Of course, it is, however, the notorious wrap under bridge that doesn't allow for palm muting that is the most famous feature of these very early Les Pauls, an unfortunate design flaw that actually saw its designer, Les Paul, very quickly replace his with a Kaufman Vibrola on his own guitar. Now, the explanation for this design quirk unfortunately comes down to a massive miscalculation on Gibson's part in regard to the required neck angle of the Les Paul, something they also notoriously got wrong on those very early ES335s. Les Paul's design had stipulated that the string was to be wrapped over the tailpiece. However, due to the lack of neck angle, the only way of making these guitars vaguely playable was to wrap the strings under, which of course then presented its own issues. Now, today you can get aftermarket parts that kind of work around this issue. However, this is one of the key reasons why these early 50s Les Pauls, that are otherwise incredibly historically important, don't fetch anywhere near the amount of money that their later 50s counterparts do. One other thing that's definitely worth mentioning about this Les Paul, however, is that the middle position is actually out of phase, magnetically so, as stock from the factory. Now, out of the kind of roughly 10 or so 50s gold tops I've played, about half of them have been this way, which I guess the only logical conclusion is that it was just a factory oversight in regard to the magnetic orientation of the pickups. Either way, it's an incredibly cool sound. After a year or so of customer feedback, both positive and not so positive, Gibson finally looked to rectify the Les Paul's playability issues in mid-1953 with the introduction of the wrap over tailpiece, which, as the name suggests, sees the strings wrapped over the tailpiece as opposed to wrapping under, as per Les Paul's original design. This was accompanied by a change of neck angle on the guitar from 1 to 3 degrees, as well as a further change to 4 degrees in 1954. And from that point onwards, there weren't really to be any major spec changes to the Les Paul until 1955. And it is from 1955 that this next stunning all-gold example comes from. Now, in regard to the guitar's all-gold finish, there's much speculation in regard to which guitars were painted all-gold, one plausible explanation being custom orders. However, the more cynical amongst us have suggested that it may just have been a way of covering up any abnormalities or idiosyncrasies in the guitar's mahogany. Either way, without stripping one, we're never going to find out, but this guitar is easily one of the best guitars I've ever played at all. It's just a phenomenal guitar in every respect. The P90s were particularly good, again out of phase in that middle position, and the frets, despite being very low, they would have been very small originally from the factory, the guitar was just immensely easy to play. It really was outstandingly good. Fall of 1955 saw the next major change to the gold top, as the wrap over tailpiece was done away with in favour of the new ABR1 bridge and stop bar tailpiece. Now, interestingly, the ABR1 had actually made its debut in late 1953 on the Les Paul Custom, the all-black kind of bigger brother of the gold top, but it was to be another 2 years until the ABR1 became a standard feature on the Les Paul Standard. Of course, the ABR1 allowing for near-perfect intonation of the guitar, something you couldn't really boast with the wrap over tailpiece, and the stop bar tailpiece allowing for tension adjustment. Don't shoot the messenger, that's how Gibson termed it in their catalogue way back in 1955, tension adjustment of the strings. However, it was in early 1957 that the final major change was to be implemented in the gold top, to move over from the P90s over to the PAF, patent applied for, humbucking pickups. Gibson's new innovative humbucking pickups, designed by employee Seth Lover, marked a major leap forward in the electric guitar's evolution, and those early PAF pickups have gone on to be some of the most revered and incredibly expensive pickups ever made. Indeed, it's one of the reasons that those late gold tops, and of course bursts between 1958 and 1960, are so incredibly sought after, and it makes perfect sense that the tonal characteristics of the P90s, of which there are so many commonalities with those PAFs, that definition and that clarity, was very much at the forefront of Seth Lover's mind when he was trying to develop a pickup that just simply bucked the hum. Frustratingly, I did play an incredibly good 57 gold top a few years ago. I'll link to the video above, but I've somehow managed to lose the original footage, so save for downloading it off YouTube, the quality of which would be horrendous, have the next best thing in its place. This staggeringly good gold top made by Panucci Guitars in the Netherlands, equipped with PAF style pickups. Sounds a little bit like this. introduction of the sunburst finish only a year later in 1958. In response to dwindling gold top sales, it should be said, the gold top was to take a back seat for the better part of 10 years. However, even a new finish couldn't halt the Les Paul's decline, because in 1961 it was superseded by the new Les Paul, a guitar that we now know and think of as the Gibson SG. However, after several bursts found their way into the hands of the likes of Eric Clapton, Peter Green, Mike Bloomfield and Keith Richards throughout the mid-1960s, Gibson decided that a reissue of the Les Paul was on the cards, starting with a 1956 spec gold top. In the years that follow, the gold top would find favour with any number of incredibly high-profile guitar players, from the likes of Slash, David Gilmour, to Duane Allman, to The Edge, to Snowy White, to name but a few. Indeed, my own Yamaha Revstar, my custom Revstar, is incredibly heavily inspired by my dream guitar, a 54 Les Paul. Gold top finish, wrap over tailpiece and two P90s. And it is incredibly heartening to see that, after a relatively rocky start, all things told, the gold top's place in rock and roll history is very much recognised today, when you can't always say that was the case. I'm going to play you out now with my gold top Revstar, but as ever, thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you next week for another episode of Friday Fretworks. Cheers guys, take care, I'll see you soon.